So, I had a lot of caffeine today, you probably can tell. I never drink coffee, and every time I do, I'm like, why did I do that? It makes me feel so, I don't know, why do you people like this stuff? How many of you are avid coffee drinkers? You're like, yeah, more than 1 cup. Keep your hands up. More than 2 cups. More than 3 cups. My, y'all, you need to check your kidneys. 4 cups, 5 cups. 6? A pot? How much is in a pot of coffee? Depends on the pot. Okay, this is like a riddle. Forget about it. Y'all, you need to drink some water too, okay? That was a lot of coffee. I just had a little bit, and I'm like, woo! So tonight's message is inspired by America. Let's start there. America, humanity, and Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. Going to be interesting. It all stemmed from a couple of conversations that I had this week. It all stemmed from a quote that I read. There was a quote that I read in a book by Thich Nhat Hanh that says, "We are all here to awaken from the illusion of our separateness." We'll start with that. We are here to awaken from the illusion of our separateness. And I thought about that a lot, and I thought there's something about that that has depth to it. I'm going to file that away in my heart, and I'm going to come back and process that some more, because I think this is more than just, hey, cool quote. This felt like, no, this is something. And I noticed a trend kind of throughout my week. A little different coffee meetings I had, different conversations, the 4th of July. There was lots of different things that really showcased this idea of separateness. And a lot of conversations on the opposite of how do we have unity? How do we have oneness? So this weekend, our country obviously celebrated the 4th of July, which, as we know, usually consists of a lot of grilled food, way too much food, corn on the cob, watermelon, fireworks, lots of fireworks. This year, celebrating the 4th of July, if I can be transparent, felt a little uneasy for me. Did anybody with me on that one? It was a hard 4th. It was a really hard 4th because I sat and I thought, well, this is the independence, the day we celebrate independence. And then I thought, but whose independence? And who is free? And I start to ask all these questions. Who is this for? Who actually has freedom? Who doesn't have freedom? And then I couldn't help but notice the political divide. Now, most of us, this time in our country, it's been difficult, to say the least, yeah? No matter where you fall on the political spectrum, it's been difficult. Now, if you're like most people, things get a little bit tense, you get a little bit irritated, and then you eventually just kind of turn a blind eye. Doesn't matter, I'm just not going to get political. Works great until you start to have engagements on social media, or until it's the 4th of July. And then you quickly are like, oh my goodness, all of our conversations on this day are centered around the thing that most of us are trying to avoid, the thing that most of us are trying not to discuss and face. And so there were a few moments on Facebook where I only posted one random thing. I, for the most part, stayed away. Someone shared something on Facebook, and I decided to read it. I don't know why I do this to myself. It's like you should know better. It's clickbait. Stay away. And I read, and my heart just broke. It just broke because I thought, how could people see things so this way? And then there's people that see things so this way. And I clearly tend to identify with probably one view more than the other, but the thing that was painful to watch is the inability to dialogue. The thing that was painful to watch is the separateness. The thing that I saw again and again was those people, this, that person that voted for this, that president, or the opposite. You fools that voted for that, blah, 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 back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I just thought, we are so divided. We are so divided. And we've heard this forever, that a nation divided falls. And we witness it right here and now. And I thought, what an interesting thing this is to experience this separateness on a grander scale. And I think in many ways this is a projection of what's going on internally as we are each own processing our own shadows. But before I dive deeper into that, you know how I love to ask questions and include y'all, because it makes things more fun. So with all of this kind of landmines, right, verbal landmines, you can't say this, you can't talk about that, there's arguments here, I want to ask the question, and I'm curious, is there's a quote, that's not a quote, it's technically a verse, but I'll quote it, in Psalms, where it says, "How good and pleasant is it when God's people live together in unity." And I thought about this idea of Psalms, this thing David is saying is really the same thing that Thich Nhat Hanh is saying, this idea of unity and this idea of separateness and how we need unity. And so with that in mind, that unity is really the goal, right? We know that. Unity really is the goal. Togetherness is the goal. Oneness is the goal. Then I thought, well, I want to kick off the question, because it's easy to talk about oneness and unity, but do we believe, I'm curious, this isn't hypothetical, I'd really love to know the responses. Do you believe unity is even possible? I know, it's tough. And y'all can shout out whatever you feel. You can say yes, no, maybe, or a longer... What are you mumbling over there, Matt? Longer answer? It could be paragraphs. It's complicated. Does anyone have a definite answer? Yeah.
Expecting it or asking anybody else to notice it in me first.
Okay, so for those watching on live stream that can't hear, Taylor said that in order to have the unity, we need to have unity within ourselves first. So it starts here before we can start trying to accomplish that with other people, okay? Anybody else? Do you think that unity is even possible?
What do you mean by unity?
Great question.
We're all unified, we're all human, we all have fears, we all have things that we love. But when I fear and I love something different than you, but my ideas are different than yours, Matt talked, in the worship song, he talked about, are we unified? Can I see myself in the face of my enemy? Can I understand that they have fears, they have pains that are driving them? That's the hard part about unity. What do you mean when you say that?
Great question. So Jen says, what do you mean by unity? You're actually touching on a great point that I think we need to talk about, is unity is not the same as conformity. Not at all. And I think we get in our minds this concept that unity means we all have to think alike. False. Impossible. If that's unity, the answer is no. Yes, exactly. The answer is no. If unity looks like absolute conformity and absolute everybody is the same, uniformity, that is, it will never happen. We are all completely different individuals, different ideals, different pains and wounds and processes. Now, if we mean unity by celebrating each other's diversity, if we mean allowing another person to be another person and for me to be me and to celebrate each other in that process, I think maybe. Anybody else? Do you think unity is even possible? So let's see if we could recap that. Maybe a willingness to see the other and a willingness to see the commonality between each other. Could that be a concise way to say that? Yeah.
In a way, a willingness to be yourself and be seen, and then a willingness to see the other person for who they are, not for who they're trying to pretend to be. And if both
Right.
of those things, so really in a lot of ways, truth is unity. So the more true we become with ourselves, and the more true everybody else as themselves, then the more unified we become. and how we really feel. So unity is truth.
Unity is truth. So maybe if we awaken to our own true selves, we become unified. And I think that's exactly what Thich Nhat Hanh is talking about, this illusion of separateness. We're actually not separate, and we've made a separate self, and we've separated each other, and then that creates a lot of chaos. That's beautifully said. That's beautifully said. So how about let's make it on a now let's go, instead of a broad spectrum, do you believe that unity is possible, let's say, for your own life? Tolerance and empathy.
I think that that's very hard in the world. Like, even if you sometimes attempt that with others, that there's this need to be right, and tolerance and empathy have to come before being right.
Ooh, can I say that out loud in case y'all missed that? Tolerance and empathy need to come before the need to be right. Yes.
Directly off of that, I heard, do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy?
Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Well, let's define happy. Because here's the other hard thing. What could look like happiness to one person could cause another person sorrow, which I think is the problem we're in as humans. I've been in this experiment. So this started with a conversation with a local minister who lives on the west side, and him and I had this engaging conversation of, let's be honest, we too have to face our own enemies. We too have to face who we're not in unity with, and who are those people for us. And I sat and I thought, well, sure, there's certain types of people. Maybe somebody who's really has no tolerance or room for someone else. That's a hard person for me. A person that literally always has to be right and has no room for another person's voice. That's difficult for me. Another group that might be a little bit difficult for me is really legalistic fundamentalists. Hard for me. It's a hard space when someone is this is the way, and they're very legalistic. And so then we both thought, what could it look like to lean into that space and find healing? And I thought, well, I will know when I'm healed in that space when I can sit in a room full of evangelicals and I'm no longer upset. I'm not 100% there yet. But I know that that would be a healing. Now, there's a difference between not approving of someone's behavior, okay? There's a difference between not approving of someone's behavior but then judging and being angry and being wounded. And I think that's where this idea of unity becomes so convoluted, and like, is it even possible? And is this just a big pipe dream? Can this even happen? And so that's why I wanted to ask this question of, like, do we even think this exists, and how can we lean into this? There's a familiar story in the book of John in chapter 8, and it's about a woman who's caught in adultery. Anybody hear this story? Anybody hear it growing up? I always thought it was strange that we were told this story as children. Maybe not something we should learn as children. This story begins, so if there are children here, come here. The story begins, I'll glaze over it. The story basically begins with Jesus teaching in a temple, right? So he's teaching, we have people listening, and in the middle of his teaching, there's a group of what we'll call the religious elite. So these people that are high in stature, these people that probably know a lot, probably have a lot of clout and power. This group of religious elite, they basically come and bring forward this woman. And I imagine sort of like dragging her, because who would willingly want to come and be like, hey, publicly persecute me? So I imagine them sort of like bullying her and pushing her in front of Jesus. They bring this woman in front of Jesus, and then they claim that she's an adulterer. They say, we've caught her. We caught her in the act. Shame on her. And they continue to showcase this woman and how terrible she is, and then call basically for the act of stoning. Now, in this point of history, it would have been a capital offense to commit adultery. So you're talking like a federal law, which is so ironic because some of the men in the Bible have like a zillion wives, and that's a whole nother story for another time. You could really go a lot of places. We have this capital offense, right? And so here she is caught committing this crime, and it's a law that's punishable unto death. And stoning was a common practice. And public stoning today probably means something way different. You can pick up on that joke. And if you don't get it, I'll tell you later. So it would have been super common, right? And it's something super foreign for us today. This idea of how we would never throw a stone and kill someone to death because of what they've done. Never. Especially something like that. If that's the case, probably half of the world would be dead. We would never do that. And then you start to see this idea of this practice at this time, this stoning that happens. And maybe we see it in our history in different ways. Maybe it wasn't stoning, but maybe it was public hanging, which we had for a really long time in our history. Maybe execution. This one could be a landmine to say, but death penalty. We have these ways of doing these things. Now, how about something a lot less violent? What about something like public ridicule, public shaming, name calling? And I couldn't help but think, like, in a way, we're seeing an ancient story that is reliving itself full volume right now. You're such a, you're this, you're awful. And it becomes this verbal stone throwing. And that's what we've engaged in. I'm better than this person. Look at what they've done. Let's stone them. The hard thing is when what that person has done isn't a great thing. Because we can think of some people where we go, actually, that isn't a good behavior. But there's still this elevation of self. I am better than this person. Let's stone them. I am better than this person. Let me claim some things and yell some things and rant. All the while, maybe I'll also do it privately from my keyboard, which is really easy to do. Really easy to do, this public stone throwing of this us versus them, me against you. This stoning, this proverbial, if we want to talk about that proverbial stone throwing. It's unity replaced by what I would say is individuality. Me and mine, and you and yours. Now, I know politics, no one ever likes to talk about politics and religion, and I understand that. I genuinely do. But when we talk about politics in a different way, I've said this before, but in more or less the policies in which we live and how that affects all of humanity, I start to think, how would it look if we lived and voted and treated people in a way that wasn't just our own vote, but how that affects the sum of the whole? That's hard. That's hard because sometimes it might be a little compromise. I might be like, that's not entirely what I want, but I actually know this is better for the greater good. That is so hard. That is so hard and I'm preaching to the choir. That's really hard to be like, I don't know that that's totally my desire, but I also see the ways in which this affects so many. And you see this unity replaced with individuality, which again, Thich Nhat Hanh says we are to awaken from our illusion of separateness. Because our separateness is an illusion. And I know it's hard to imagine, so just hear with me, because I'm going to kind of just go on a little bit of a rant for a second, or I shouldn't say rant, that sounds negative. I'm just going to take a little verbal walk for a minute. I know that I'm in my body, right? And you're in your body, and you're in your body. We're living separate lives, separate experiences. I have my own thoughts, my own feelings, my own life. And yet there's something deep within me that knows that we're all manifestations of the divine. There's something deep within me that knows that there's an interconnectedness. There's something deep within me that knows we're probably more connected and the same than we realize. And so when you lean into that, you start to realize maybe this time that we're in is this what we would call being awakened to that illusion, that we've forgotten. Now I want to lean real quick into the Genesis poem, because you're going to go, how in the world does all this make sense and matter? So the Genesis poem, if you're familiar with it, and I do call it a poem because scholars would call it Hebrew poetry, right? So we have this poem that starts straight out the gate with a story of separateness. So the first separation is between who and who, would you say? There's no necessarily right or wrong. Between humans and God, okay? That's sort of this first idea. I'm not saying, we'll leave that there. So we have this story of this separateness as it's been told. This poem as it's been told, that the first thing that happens is humans are here, humans are on earth, humans are created, and then you have this idea of, wait a minute, me and the divine, we're now separate. We're now separate entities. And there's this lie that I'm going to believe this lie, we're separate. Then you have this second thing that happens, another type of separateness. Does anyone know the first violent crime that was committed in Genesis? Cain and Abel. So you then have another type of separateness. Now this separateness is not you and the divine, it's you and your brother. And you see this continual, and I thought this is so obvious, and I don't know that I've seen this before, that you have this narrative straight from the get-go of this divine spark bursting itself out into creation, creating all the things, and then the things forgetting that they're one. And they forget, oh yeah, I'm part of this original source. I'm part of you. I'm part of God. I'm part of it all. Now it's just me and my. And we start to develop what many would call the ego. We start to develop this other thing that masquerades as me. And it's just a different kind. It's an illusion. It's not really who I am. And so if you're kind of like, what does this mean? How about, let me give you a quote, because I think we can go back to this idea of when we create this separate self, we forget and we start to identify with, I'm Angie, I'm the pastor. I'm Angie, I'm the graphic designer. I'm Angie, I'm this. Those are all great. Those are parts of who we are, parts of who we are in our identity in this body. We forget there's a bigger truth behind that. I'm Angie, and I'm part of the human race, which is a part of you, which is a part of you, which is part of this planet, which is part of love, which is part of God's creation. And so when I think Jesus talks again, one of the things he talks about most in the Bible is the kingdom of God. And he talks again and again and again about bringing it here on earth and having this repair, if you will. And I start to see this idea of what if this repair is awakening to our illusion of separateness? What if this repair is wait a minute, we're fighting against each other, but why? Because we believed a lie a really long time ago, somewhere within who knows what, we believed a lie that we're not supposed to be for each other. There's a quote that I love, in her latest book, Michelle Obama writes, "It's hard to hate people up close." It's hard to hate people up close. Brené Brown says something really similar, so similar that I don't know who wrote it first, to be honest. I looked at the credits. I don't know if Michelle Obama said it first or Brené Brown, but they're both awesome, so we'll give them both credit. Brené Brown said, "People are hard to hate close up, move in. Speak truth to," well, there's children here, so I kind of bleeped it out. "Be civil, hold hands with strangers, strong back, soft front, and wild heart." There's something that happens when we go from, you're a fool, you make me this, I'm better than you, how could you even vote that way? How could you think that way? You're such a fool, to putting the stone down and actually getting up close. And doing a harder thing. Tell me why you did that. So, listen, I'm actually having a hard time. I do disagree with you. Tell me why you voted that way. I'd love to hear your process. Hard. I'm hearing a lot of people like, I don't know that I can do that. Yeah, I don't know that I can do that either. This is why we're talking about it. Or let's take it out of the political thing. When someone does something and you're like, I really don't like that they act this way, or their faith is so strange, their spirituality, their religion, they're this, they're that. And leaning in and going, what would it look like to just sit and try to understand this human? What would that look like? Maybe somewhere along the line I could figure out, oh, this actually makes sense in your world. I'm not saying it's the healthy decision, but it makes sense considering where you were raised, where you came from, your experiences, the narratives you've been told, what has been handed to you. Of course, this is your outcome. Now let's have a discussion about it, and now let's have a continual shared discussion. And maybe, just maybe, we'll see that we want the same things. We're approaching it very differently. And instead, we're othering each other. if that makes sense. So people are hard to hate close up. Unless it's, I was about to make a joke. I was going to say, unless it's, I don't know, your family, which is usually sometimes the case. So what I want to know, One Church, is will we choose to lean in and do the hard work? Because I think that when you fight violence with violence, the only equation is violence. When you fight verbal attacks with verbal attacks, the only thing that results is verbal attacks. When you fight intolerance with intolerance, you just get intolerance. And so this situation we're in requires a third way. And it's the harder way. It's the harder way. The ego really loves to argue. It really loves to be right. It really loves to be like, you're an idiot. Why would you ever say that thing? It loves that. It's the harder thing to say, okay, you and I, when I look into your face, as that song says, when I look into the face of my enemy, I actually see my brother. I see a kindredness. Even though I don't understand you, even though you may make me hurt or my blood boil, but there's something in the root of you that's in me. And with that same thought, the something that's in them is in me, we have to also realize the same behavior that's in them resides in us. Now, that is hard. We want to project our shadow onto something else. We want to say, again, those people, that group of people, this person. Again, this is not supporting someone's behavior, okay? So I don't want you to get those views mixed up. I'm not saying go ahead and advocate for everyone being totally horrendous. Not at all. I'm saying I think there's many, many times where we need to lean in and realize that a lot of these issues are more complex. And we also need to realize that that same shadow that's in them is in us. The same goodness that's in them is in us. And are we willing to do that work? Will we choose to see our oneness, or will we keep believing this lie? Will we keep believing a lie, an illusion of separateness? There's a Zen phrase that says, a fool sees himself as another, but a wise man sees others as himself. And that's hard. Does anyone feel that's hard to do? Got a few people? It's hard. It's super easy with people I really like. I hear some laughter, but it's true. It's super easy with people maybe I don't even know, but we at least sort of are on the same page. It's really, really hard to see others as myself when the other is someone that persecutes, when the other is someone that hates, when the other one is the other that judges, when the other is the person that punishes, persecutes, and alienates groups of people. How do I see myself in that? That's hard. And what does it look like to repair? What does it look like to have deeper, engaging conversations to repair that? And when I think you see a society kind of go off the rails and you see a certain type of behavior, history proves itself because history does repeat itself again and again and again. You often get to this polarizing chaos and then usually a war. And it's only after that that there tends to be some sort of a peace. And I'm like, is it going to require war to have peace? The problem is I would love to be saying this to other people that disagree with me. That's the problem. I have a feeling most of you in here are like, this is hard work, but I probably think I would try to do this. It's hard to say it to the other people that wouldn't want to even be here, wouldn't want to listen to us, wouldn't engage. Now that is challenging work. But that's the work that I oddly feel called to dabble into. And I told my wife, I said, maybe I need to go attend an evangelical church one Sunday. You're all like, don't do it, it's crazy. Maybe I need to sit down with someone who has extremely opposing views from me. It might be helpful for me to hear where they're coming from. Worst case scenario, it doesn't end well, and well, I'll never do that again. So I want to leave you with a question, and we're going to have a little bit of a question for a minute. So how do we, because I know when talking about unity and oneness, again, it can all sound like this beautiful, perfect roses and ponies pipe dream. But yet, there's part of us that believes it exists. Why else do you keep working towards hope? Why else do you keep working for social justice? Why else do you keep working in your faith or in your practice? It's because there's a part of you that not only wants that for yourself, but you want to be a part of this evolving help of humanity. So there's a part of us that believes in it. And so how do we create spaces where people, and this is the question, can come together to talk, listen, and share stories and ideals to build stronger communities, even when people might not agree or share the same history or perspective? So how do we create spaces for that? I'll shorten that. How do we create spaces for people to share differing perspectives in a healthy way? Anybody have any thoughts?
You teach ways to listen with respect. Like you asked us to do when we had discussions like we did 2 weeks ago. You listen and hold space, whether you understand it or not. Try to hold space for the other.
Okay. So in case you didn't hear, what Jen is saying is really true. You're really, it's how it's set up, right? So it has to be set up in a way that you are taught to respect and hold space for that discussion, even if you don't agree. Oh, that's hard. What do you think those spaces would look like? Alcohol-free. It's funny, someone laughed. I think they thought you were going to say alcohol, which, man, there's some people that drive you to drink. Alcohol-free. So what you're getting at is awareness, right? Being awake and present with a person. Yep, being present. Because that kind of work probably requires your full self. I imagine you get two opposing views and you get a few drinks, it could end up really bad. Yeah, it's good. Anything else?
I've been learning this a lot lately. Active listening is different than listening.
Active listening is different than listening.
So to actually be able to have that space where someone says their view and you, completely disagreeing with it, don't immediately respond, but actually repeat back. Okay, so what you're saying is this, and this. And then they're like, no, that's not what I said. I said this, and this. So that's a huge difference. And then those little nuances can completely change the way that things are taken and what's actually being said. So to have active listening where you repeat back the opposing view is really important.
That's really important. Active listening, y'all. It's challenging. Active listening is something I really enjoy until it gets like, okay, let's use a hypothetical. Someone says they're all in favor for the persecution and treatment of X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I'm not sure that's what they're saying. I repeat it back to them. So I think this is what I hear you're saying. And then they reply, yep. I can't be silent anymore. How do I respond to this? That is where it gets interesting into the conversation of how do we have reparative social justice in conjunction with unity? And I think they work together. It's just we're trying to find how do you do that still respects and upholds the other? How can you do that in the what would you call the highest way? The way that really says, okay, is this my ego fighting for this thing, or is this because this is actually for the repair of us all, you and me. We need this. So one last question. And then Matt, you want to come up if you feel, whenever you're ready? Matt will listen. And actually, he will probably, I don't want to steal his thunder, but during this last portion, have a moment of reflection. And have a moment of listening to what those words are saying. So the last question is, and how are y'all doing? You all right? This is a little different. Like I said, I don't love just like free-flowing. It feels too messy for me. And I like things tied up. And what? I should always do this? I like things tied up perfectly. This is where I lean. I think my Enneagram, so I'm a 2. I think my 3 and my 1 are both like perfection and performance. This is not going well. Ego, be quiet. Okay, how do we as individuals and as a nation push back against cynicism and the us versus them battles that divide us? So how do we as individuals and as a nation push back against that cynicism of us versus them?
Well, I can only speak for myself.
Yeah, go for it.
I just feel like it's also an illusion to think that we can change what someone else thinks. So the second that I have released the need to control someone else or change someone else, I've found freedom within myself. So I feel like we can show up without trying to change someone else. Then it just changes the whole environment and energy of the room.
Okay. So releasing the need to change or control someone else. See, because that's the hard work. The person that might be the persecutor, of course we want to change that. Because what we want them to stop doing the thing they're doing. Well, yes, that's why we have a legal system. Those things should stop. But change, we can't, let's be honest, we can stop the behavior by locking people up or doing X, Y, and Z. We can't cause change. Change has to be something we do on our own. That is hard. That's good. That's really good. Anyone else? I'll repeat it again. How do we as individuals and as a nation push back against that cynicism, the us versus them? You were about to say something. Yeah.
What we're talking about is an illusion.
So what we're talking about is illusion.
So, like, they say that yoga isn't about bringing you back to the truth of yourself. It's removing all of your obstacles, preventing you from seeing the truth of who you are, which is love. So if we're in this illusion of separateness, the separateness isn't real. So we have to make peace with all of the places in which we've allowed ourselves to feel separate. We have to dissolve those barriers that have, reinforce the idea and the illusion that we're separate. We're born into amnesia. We forget the truth of who we are. We forget that we're all one, that we're all connected, that we're all, individuated manifestations of God's source, creator energy, right? I don't know collectively how you do that. I personally don't know if I haven't seen it for millennia, for humanity. Like, we don't have evidence that you know how to wake people up out of that amnesia, that they're separate, to not treat each other like themselves, to not see that you are me,
Yes.
and I'm you.
Yeah.
Like, you and I, it's easy. We look like sisters.
Haircut.
But yeah, like, how do I feel that way about Trump or Hitler or whoever,
Yes. Oh man, next time I will come prepared with a mic, because when we get in these deep ones, and there's some really great nuggets, y'all missed it. I will try my best to summarize that really well put thought process. This idea that even that the illusion of separateness, even that idea of separate, all of it is an illusion, because we have been born into amnesia. This idea that we have been born into this state of forgetting, if you will. And that knowing, that's the hard work. That's the hard work, that we have literally stepped into this constant state of amnesia. And that's what I keep thinking is getting back to a state of remembering. And so if you're rooted in the Christian tradition, the state of remembering that you're connected to goodness, you're connected to divine, well, you also then are connected to every single person. If you're rooted in a different tradition or no tradition at all, you're connected to love, to humanity, to universe, to source. It's all the same thing, just different language. And that is so beautifully said, this amnesia. And that's why I think Thich Nhat Hanh uses this word awaken, which I think is probably one of the most poignant words in that entire sentence, is awaken. Because how can you even be aware of your separateness if you're asleep? You can't. Then you get stuck in the cycle for a really long time, because you don't even know it's a cycle. You don't even know you're in it. How many of you have been there? Asleep. How many of you feel like you're sort of waking up? You're awake or waking up? trying to, something. Yeah. I don't know that we ever fully arrive, right? Right? I don't know that we ever fully arrive, but like you're trying to. You're sort of like, wait, there's a part of my core that remembers this isn't how this thing should go. So that's really, I think that I'm going to leave it at that to move on to the music portion. But this idea, I know it's really kind of raw, but this idea has been on my heart for a long time. And the reason why I wanted to start with this is next week we talk about asylum seekers. You want to talk about the biggest illusion of separateness. The biggest illusion of separateness that I'm seeing right now is politics and those across the border. And if we can see things as a human issue, rather than which political party and how we vote. If we can see things as a human issue, it changes everything. The week after, I'm going to talk about how things get lost in translation. How a lot of times what we hear and languages and verbiages maybe we use for God, maybe we use for different things, they get lost in translation because we don't know what we're saying. And then we kick off a series on interfaith. And so after that, we'll have 2 months of different people coming from different faith backgrounds, sharing their experiences. And so I'm trying to, in many ways, help us be present in the here and now with our country, but also help us be present for when we have different conversations from somebody that has a very different view or a very different belief system, that we hold this space of what is their journey and how can I listen and how can I get this idea that this person is actually more like me than I realize. Matt, I'll leave it to you. I'll let there be an awkward transition, and I'll leave it to you. Can we do something really weird? Everybody's like, maybe, sure, yeah, you're up for it. All right, can we form a giant circle? Get out of your seats as you're able, and as you're comfortable, let's form a giant circle. I don't know why, but I envisioned this today. And I was like, I want to make this happen. Form a giant circle so that we can all then hold hands, okay? I don't know how it's going to work in this building, but we're gonna try our best. You might have to go through pews. Nobody? Whitney's in the middle? Can we do it? Do we need to spread further apart? We're going to stretch it. We'll make it do. Yeah. Don't make it hurt. Be careful. Those are attached to real people, real bodies. Sorry, my hands are sweaty. Oh, move forward. I mean, sure. Yeah. Okay, did everyone connect? Yes. It took a little bit of work to get us all connected, though, didn't it? There was a little bit of stretching and moving, and I had things in my way, and I had to get out of them. I know this is really very kumbaya, but I couldn't help myself, and I said, no, this is what it looks like to be a unified body. Not separate and sparsed out, and one person doing their thing, and one person having this thing, and one person judging or us and them. It's this. It's right here. And so, One Church, may you go in peace. May you go in love. May you go in unity. May you go in practicing the hard work of unity. May you go in practicing the hard work of working on your own ego, as I will do mine. And may we awaken to our illusion of separateness. May you remember the divinity that you were created from, the spark that resides in us all. And may that love, may God's permeating love, whatever name you choose to call it, be found and present in us all. Go in peace, go in love. Amen.